Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for very kind words. Thank you. Come closer. Yep. Thanks. Take this. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm speaking about business and the rule of law. Business persons bring market reality into the courts of law daily. Business people speak reality, common sense, logic, financial logic, where lawyers speak the dissection of words and the interpretation of meanings where a word has simply one meaning. But conversely, business persons also have to bring the rule of law into their daily business. If this is not done, then after a while a real danger emerges. Just as we did not bring constitutional reality into our politics, Kenya has landed up by having politics without any rules. You can do anything, anyhow, in order to secure a political result, a political office. And once office is obtained, we are prevented from asking, how was it obtained? And so we should not land business into that situation where business too becomes a set of transactions without any rules. That is not rational capitalism. So, as business persons, you have to continually press for rational capitalism. And the basis of rational capitalism, or some of the bases, are the enforceability of contracts, the protection from the courts against fraudulent business, the availability of judges who are independent of political control. Because in Kenya, or anywhere where state actors are the richest businessmen, your competitors are also used to getting their way in business as much as in politics, before judges, and also, sadly, also before arbitrators. So watch your arbitration clauses carefully and try and seek a board of arbitrators which really genuinely gets you an independent arbitrator. Now, the safeguard for rational business is the rule of law. So the rule of law encompasses fair and impartial judges, equality of parties before the court, remedies for breach of agreements, independence of the judiciary, but, and I'll come to this later, independence of public officials, the civil service, I mean, and access to all this, these protections is what is set out, and the visible and the public contract of the rule of law between all Kenyans and all parties in Kenya is the Constitution. So all these safeguards are anchored in the Constitution. A live example of all these, meaning the presence of safeguards and the presence of processes, and yet the presence of a crisis, is the way in which the government has brought the Adani companies into the Kenyan commercial investment and national infrastructure scene. This is not rational capitalism. This is robber baron capitalism, where outcomes emerge and are ensured through the very close ties of the intending contracting parties with very high offices in both the states. Such capitalism disobeys, disregards, and disdains law and the Constitution. We must remind ourselves that the Adani entry, but we must remind ourselves, however, because that bad entry has not become a fait accompli only because there is a very strong public demand in Kenya for compliance with the Constitution and the laws in national decision-making on such important deals, meaning for a return to rule of law. And for this demand, we have to thank the Gen Zs. Because the Gen Zs did not only speak for themselves, they spoke for the silent people in Kenya who had not spoken up, and any poll, scientific, intuitive, or whatever, would say that when the Gen Z spoke, 80%, if not more, of the country said, yes, that's exactly correct. So thank you. It's, therefore, we go back and say that politics is without rules in Kenya, but we should technically also look at it. How is that? What are we really saying technically? Technically, we are saying that whatever is being done is contrary to the Constitution. But it is contrary to the Constitution while there is already a Constitution in force. And so you have a Constitution in place and governance which is contrary to it at the same time. And so, while there has been a constitution in Kenya for long, we have had total control over the judges' decisions, torture chambers at Nyayo House, regular assassinations, Robert Oko, Bishop Mong'are, J.M. Kariuki, Karimi Nduthu, Pio Pinto, Boya, Ngala, Father Kaiser, the IBC murder, as Macbeth said, will that long line continue forever? And yes, there is a real danger that authoritarian regimes reach that point where they tip over without solutions into this course of conduct, and they think that the assassination of one person ends their problems. And so, while from 25th June, they have looked for the one person or institution or organization which, if they can eliminate, they would put an end to the nonsense that these youngsters are doing. So they looked for these persons and said, this is Uhuru. And then they said, no, it is Raila. And then they said, no, and came up with Ford Foundation. And then they said, no, because he's meeting Ford Foundation a few days ago, forgetting that his wife was a recipient of that Ford Foundation money, and no doubt, because they're very generous, was passing on that money to them. So All this was forbidden even by the old constitutions. But the contradiction, contra-constitutionalism, has an inevitable end. It breaks the country, because the country is torn between the two, and neither has a solution to offer to the wrongs that are going on in the country, or even the rights. And so, in 2008, we broke. Divided country, no solution, no belief in the presidency, no belief in the courts, no belief in the churches, no belief in the mosques, no belief anywhere. And that break in 2008, we were fortunate, we survived it, and we barely survived it, and we worked towards a new constitution and came to Constitution of Kenya 2010 to prevent a repetition. But we are now again still threatened by contra-constitutional governance and rule. So, indulge me to explain how is it possible to have a constitution and yet rule like this, a one-man rule, a one-party rule. And there are three constituents. There are many, but three major ones. The first one is taking total control of the judges and magistrates. By doing that, this deprives any political opponents, any person who has suffered an injustice, without a remedy, to bring such persons to become without a remedy. And when they have no remedy, this control continues and contra-constitutionalism continues. Secondly, and this is what escapes our sight, because it's not as visible, and it is this: by taking not only control of the judges and magistrates, number two, control of the civil servants, which is now called the public service. So, President Moi would rule every morning. He was an extremely hard worker. He would be up at 4, and he had an arrangement with God that I'll pray to you daily, but you don't audit too closely what I do the rest of the hour. So he would then ring up intelligence. What has happened during the night? And intelligence would say, well, in that time there were provinces, that coast region was quiet, but there was a problem in say, Rift Valley. Then he would ring up the provincial commissioners and get their account, what has happened, and they would say, nothing has happened, or 3 things happened in Rift Valley, so he gets that. Then he would ring up a constable in a police station in wherever, say the Rift Valley, for example, and get his information from that. And then, if it was being fostered, for example, by James Orengo, as Mr. Mesha said, then he would tell the police station there, we are arresting that guy and we are sending him to Mong'are instead of Kisumu. And you better watch what's going on and who is going to. So a thank you to Mr. Mesha for standing as surety on a bail. It was not easy then. His name, his particulars, everything would be fed into intelligence. So, what happens is, Moi then instructs the provincial commissioner to tell the police to go and arrest Mr. Orengo. Now, you don't hear about that step being taken because the policemen say, well, what is the charge? What shall we? And the president would say, well, that's your problem. You go and find a cause to arrest him. I want him out from this situation here. So you don't see that. He is arrested, and then the instruction goes to the Treasury saying, take away the allocation of this district in Nyanza, James comes from Siaya, and see that the road which was to be built there is stopped. And then rings up the DO there and says, tell them, everybody, at the next baraza, that the road is spoiled because Nyanza is making trouble through Mr. Orengo. None of this is in the newspapers, and this is going on all over the country. That is why you saw when the president moved to say, Naivasha, he would stand there, and in a line there were the PC, the DC, and with their helmets and uniforms and their saluting, etc. And he's talking directly to them, bypassing the MP, the minister. They're all there, but they're nothing. He doesn't need them. Does he need lawyers? No. Does he need accountants? No. Because he tells the Treasury, this is to be done. To those who are accountants here, let's take Goldenberg. The payments from the Treasury require 4 people before the LPO can be acted upon with a check. You've got the clerk in accounts who sets out, who's told, pay this much, so many million, and it is for exports. So he does that. Where's the voucher? Well, fine, it'll come. We'll give it to you. Then it goes to the cashier. The cashier looks and says, fine, this is there. It goes to internal audit, and then it goes, number 4, to the then permanent secretary, who is the accounting officer of every ministry. 4 signatures were needed. How come there were 4 signatures always available for a total of 4 billion shillings at a time when we never talked in billions? It was finally in the Goldenberg Commission when the PS, Dr. Koinange, medical doctor, comes from a family, extremely respected family. He's asked in Goldenberg, why did you sign these things? He said, because I was afraid of my life. So what is the third thing then that is needed for this? It is this. And this is been written about by Wole Soyinka. Wole Soyinka has described it that there are 2 states. There is the real state, despite being constitutionally elected, but through the choices it makes in governance, also conducts its affairs through the quasi-state. Allied with an agency of terror, Nyayo House, that derives from its own formal powers, that it is protected, no one can go there, and enjoys its connivance, that it's works for them. It sports Janus-like 2 faces, denying its furtive ally, that is Nyayo House, any formal recognition. There's nothing of it appears in any report, any government report, any government statement, but empowering it at the same time. This is a secretive terror machine launched as if it were a virtually autonomous arm of state policy, but distanced from, protected from the knowledge of its existence and operations. That is how you rule without needing the Constitution. He doesn't need judges, magistrates, except to put Orengo in. He doesn't need the correct civil procedure regulations, because a civil servant is entitled under the financial regulations. If he notices or wants to question, he can write a memorandum to the minister through the PS. The PS can check with the minister. Minister says, no, send the money off. The PS makes a memorandum, and it goes back and say, no, this is there. The person then has to obey it, but is entitled to put a memorandum saying, I disagree with this, but I'm doing it. Some of that actually was on the Goldenberg files. But the threat of this type of retaliation, transfer, etc. Now, that is why there is a public service commission under the new Constitution. That is what will stop those of you who are old enough to remember that time. Every 1 o'clock news on Voice of Kenya, there was the announcement that the president has relieved the police commissioner and he has appointed him the chairman of Uplands Bacon Factory. True, absolutely, I quote verbatim. Or that the PS in the Ministry of this has been transferred as the accounting officer Garissa, or Mong'are even. Now, in theory, the public officer cannot be moved like that. Therefore, this Constitution is trying to check to fill the gaps that are in that. And that is how these people have worked the system without in any way needing anybody in these things. And its roots go back very far back to 1964. In 1963, the Prime Minister, then Jomo Kenyatta, was elected member of Parliament, Gatundu. And he came into Parliament as Prime Minister, and on the English and the Indian Commonwealth model, was there to answer questions, Prime Minister's question time, etc. And then the 1964 Constitution came into place, and he was made President of the Republic. But in the 1964 Constitution, it actually is an article, a section of the law saying that the President need not attend Parliament, that no one can summon him to Parliament, and therefore no one can question him. And it is this line of the will of a single person getting into our political world. So that is what Ruto is trying to do again. He is not in Parliament. He need not ask. Why does where did he learn all these things? He learned it because he went to school in Kang. And the course was the YK 92. that is Youth for KANU 92, because 92 is the year of the election. So, did Moi go around in a combi, standing up and driving and stopping at Naivasha or Tumutumu or Ahero and meeting the people? And there he would say, we are sending soldiers to Korea or to X or to Y. And what does his pupil do now? Go around in a combi, driving up, stopping at Naivasha, etc., and coming out with questions of policy. Our troops will go to Haiti. Our troops will do this. These judges are bad. Does he say it in Parliament? No. Does he issue a statement? Is it on record? Is it a Gazette notice? No. You have to go back, and what you all have done is that you all beat him at his own game. You didn't send a Gazette notice to each other. You didn't send couriers up and down, and therefore he was nonplussed. You all did it so well that they were puzzled. So it is a question of looking back, and you see these people do. So these are the things that lead to one-man rule, one-party rule. But what interests you all as investors and businessmen, business persons, is this, that in such a system, power is centralized, but even wealth is centralized, right there. Each of the presidents of Kenya have been in their time the richest persons during their rule. And that is exactly what is sought to be repeated. So you have to be careful and see that the rule of law becomes one of your demands in the approach to in your due diligence. How much, and press for it. It is one of your bargaining chips, and this is important. So we have to remember, you have to remember, that Mr. Ruto was totally against the 2010 Constitution. And he campaigned heavily up and down the country. And he said, once you pass this, you minority Christians, you will be killed by the Muslims. Then he went to the Muslim areas and said, you minority Muslims, you will be killed by the Christians if you pass this. Then he went to those people who were for abortion and against abortion and worked the thing around there. So this is a person that was totally against this, and he must not forget that the overwhelming majority of Kenyans were for the Constitution of 2010, and they remain an overwhelming majority. So how to actualize this? And so let us take a look at how he has dealt with the protests that came. It is a protest anchored deep in the Constitution. It has a single article. Article 37 says, every citizen has the right, peaceably and unarmed, to assemble. That's very important first. To protest and to deliver a communication to any public officer. So what he has done, when Nane came round this time, he cordoned off Nairobi so that the protesters could not assemble and therefore could not protest. And he communicated with the American ambassador to say, see, I have not killed anybody today. And when the American embassy said, but you have prevented the protest, and he said, that is the Kenya way. You don't understand, you see. You don't understand Kenyan things. So, can he do that? So let's see. We say that there is nothing in Article 37 and nothing in Article 24 which allows limitation of certain rights. But let us see whether there's anything else in law or even in common law. And let me give you an illustration that he cannot, and it is this. Last year, 2023, on the 5th of May in England, common law England, was the coronation of King Charles III. And that day, there is an anti-monarchist society in Britain which wants to abolish the monarchy and has no respect for them. So the commissioner, and they said, on the time that the coronation is going on, we will be protesting out in the streets. So the commissioner of police in Metropolitan Police, she felt that it would be really bad for the coronation to be spoilt by a protest, and that she had no sympathy with those protesters. So she arrested the leaders the night before and locked them up. When the morning came, the protesters, all the others quickly announced, etc. And throughout the country, from Tories and Liberals and Labour and everybody, said, you can't do that. Protest is a common law right. You can't prevent a protest. And so she quickly released those guys, and she had to formally apologize. So this is not something that some jumped up OCS from anywhere can say, I decide that I think it's disrespect to my president and commander-in-chief that they protest, I will lock them up. Actually, he's doing it right from the top, orders. But you can't do it. So, what really then Ruto did, by cordoning off Nairobi, he is basically saying, I promise I will not kill any protesters if you promise not to hold any protest. You see? You don't hold the protest, I don't kill you. But that is not democracy. It's just blackmail, because he's saying, I will do the wrong unconstitutional thing and cordon this off to obey the injunction not to kill. But if you protest against my cordoning this, I will kill. So he's saying, I will abide by the Constitution by breaking the Constitution even more. Now, this is the sort of response that this government has done to this. How then did the government respond, describe who they were dealing with? So during the protests, the protesters, the youth of the country, were called in very foul-mouthed terms. You all were criminals, you all were treacherous, and you all were anarchists. Now, why call them anarchists? Anarchists is a political identification which faded away nearly more than 100 years ago. By the end of the First World War, there was no such ideology moving in world politics. So, but at that time, anarchists were typified as bomb-throwing revolutionaries. So now the term is being dragged into the 21st century to say, because the protesters, we have identified them, they are anarchists, that shows that they are revolutionaries. And if they are revolutionaries, it's perfectly all right to shoot all revolutionaries. And it was also to get support from our non-AU ally, who would be expected to be against revolutionaries. But they didn't bite. And secondly, George Orwell, in his novel 1984, indicated a better identification of revolutionary sources. This is what he wrote. In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So let us see, normally the people who speak the truth are good guys, and those who bring deceit are the bad guys. They wear bad black Stetsons and go around waiting at railroad stations to shoot up people. So let us see who was telling the truth and who was bringing deceit into the debate on what's going on. And here is the irony. Ironically, Mr. Ruto has not said that the Gen Zs were not speaking the truth. He admits that the cost of living is too high. He has not taken any steps to reduce anything. He admits that the protesters have a right to protest. He keeps repeating that Kenya is a democracy. He admits that the Finance Act and the bill did not have the consent of the people. He withdrew it. He admits that many people have died when the police were shooting. His police chief resigned. He admits that the government does not obey court orders. His police chief has apologized to the judiciary. Mr. Ruto is clear. The protesters are telling the truth. So if the protesters are telling the truth, where then is that universal deceit coming from? So let us see some of the deceits which are visible in the country and see where they came from, who is responsible for these. The first deceit is that the regime is a practicing democracy. That's the first deceit. 2, it is a deceit that the regime can refuse accountability when asked for it by the people. 3, it is a deceit that the government of Kenya does not know about abductions. 4, it is a deceit and a callous deceit that a 12-year-old boy with 8 bullets was killed by an unknown person. It is a deceit that the regime is entitled to use live bullets to shut down lawful protests. It is a deceit that the regime is entitled to ignore the calls of the church to stop corruption. It is a deceit that the government can deny public participation whenever it wants. It is a deceit that some of the killings were the work of a criminal who snatched the gun from a policeman. It is a deceit that the government need not obey any court orders. It is a deceit that the government can keep whatever they want confidential in a national budget. It is a deceit that this government can rule without obeying the Constitution. It is a deceit that Article 1 gives sovereign power to the President and not the people. It is a deceit that the government can declare an emergency by itself. It is a deceit that the government can hide the IMF arrangements and control from the people. It is a deceit that the government can withhold the Adani JKIA documents from the people. It is a deceit that the government can pretend that it is not withholding other Adani interests in the Kenyan infrastructure of health and other key areas. It is a deceit that the government is not truthful about reducing unemployment to millions of our youth. The latest example of this deceit is where the German government minister came out to correct the lies that there were 250,000 jobs by a bilateral agreement between Kenya and Germany. It is a deceit that the government was protecting property and our economy by shooting at our youth. They were protecting themselves. And the biggest deceit is that this government still does not acknowledge that Kenyans are in mourning for a large number of deaths. Cumulatively, these deceits amount to that universe of deceit that Orwell identified. And that is why he wanted to call the Gen Z's criminals, treacherous, and anarchists, and which itself was a brazen lie. So when we apply Orwell's perceptive tests, the revolutionaries who speak the truth are not the bad guys. And those bringing about the universe of deceit are. And Article 37 is there because Article 37 is a way of speaking the truth. I turn to on the same issue, to the acting Inspector General's answers while purging his contempt before Mr. Justice Lawrence Mugambi in the High Court. He said, "I'm sorry I disobeyed you, but I never had the custody of the 3 youth." Now notice, he never promised to investigate and apprehend those who had abducted them. It is a deceit to pretend that abducting is not against the Constitution, and it is a deceit to pretend that he has no duty to investigate any further, although he is withholding investigation in the face of the particulars given in the affidavits attached to the habeas corpus applications. One of the LSK, Law Society of Kenya, advocates in cross-examination asked him, "Do you not think that after 7 non-appearances before the court and a conviction of contempt, on the very day you decide to come to the court to apologize is the same day that these 3 youths are found?" And he smiled. And he says, "I don't know. Sijui. They were never in police custody." Now, what this shows is that there is not the slightest expectation that should remain in the minds of anybody that there is a change in the thinking. And this approach of contra-constitutionalism will continue. So, the Inspector General doesn't say, I am sorry that these things, not sorry, because that could be misunderstood, that I feel for the families of the 3 abductees, because they've suffered many days of fear and uncertainty. He doesn't say that. But what is happening in these abductions is not only very heavy physical torture, but very great psychological torture, leaving fear, the inability to sleep, and lasting mental injury, both to the young abductees and their families. Those series of funerals that were going on was too much to take for many people, because many people, the people were close to many of the persons who were killed. And he does not. Secondly, this Inspector General, right at the top, he's number 2 now, nor did he take the opportunity to say, I also promise to do my best to find and apprehend the escaped suspect of the Mong'are horrors. They apprehend a person, and he mysteriously escapes, and there is no investigation. They have his description. They can find and kill, they can find and abduct people from photographs, triangulation at Safaricom, getting the address, and then going at night in an unnumbered car, not in uniform, baklava, and so on. They can do that, but they can't find an escapee in this. So, what help can we give the Gen Zs? I come with a message from some of them. Number 1, to the diaspora, stay engaged. This is very important. Very important. They must know that people are behind them. Secondly, spread the truth in the US about what is going on in Kenya. The members of Congress, and you all have access, and as David has said, they are asking for ideas about how to have greater US influence in Kenya. It is important that they speak with the facts with them. We are calling for dossiers from Nairobi, names, dates, missing, etc., one after the other, names of all the people killed and so on. So, Mr. Lani, you have to organize that as well. Get that into, you see, one of the reactions when the Gen Zs, 25th June, and follow-ups came from the US government, one reaction was, this is terrible. Ruto is our man, and we'll have to keep him. Because at that time it was very strong. He must go, he must go, he must go. And that was the reaction, David. There's a difference between keeping your man as a strategic ally while you're competing with the Chinese, very real, but between the ambassador who says that is my creation there, I brought him here, I gave him the state visit, the state dinner, the state luncheon, and he's completely with us. We give him strategic intelligence because he's a non-NATO ally, and we must keep him because we are at an advantage with the Chinese. No, if you went around asking Gen Z, or anybody in Kenya, do you want the Chinese who don't interfere at all? They just want to come here and extract anything, whether it's uranium or whether it is dollars. Or would you prefer an American who is supporting Ruto openly when he's shooting youngsters? You'll know what the answer will be. So there are ways in which American influence can go forward in a positive manner without in any way weakening American interests there. And the example is when Smith Hempston was the ambassador during Moy's time. He was supportive of the democratic demands in Kenya, but he was also the ambassador who brought Moy to grant US landing rights and base rights for Somalia when the Americans went into Mogadishu. So there are ways to do these things without this old South American thing. Pinochet is our man, and right or wrong, he can kill Chileans, he can throw them in the sea, Argentine, and so on. So there are ways in which influence can be done. So the lobbying is extremely important then. And what are we lobbying? We're lobbying to show abductions, we're lobbying to show the extent of the torture that is done. 3, 4, 5 days is enough for trained. And remember, look at our policemen in Haiti. What uniforms are they wearing? What is their battle dress? Then, have you ever seen any of that battle dress policemen in Kenya? No. So the training of the people who are torturing is also highly sophisticated. And we know where it's coming from, and possibly from their other ally in the Middle East. So these are the things that are harming our youth. And these are things that we don't have, and those American soldiers who came back from Afghanistan and Vietnam could not deal with these things for years. So it is important that the lobbying is done in this way and the killings. We are looking at funds. The Gen Zs need funds. How do we reach them? Ask Ms. Jelani. Explain when you meet one-to-one with people that you can, I will see that the funds go to the proper places. A message to you. The message from my sources are saying that only the celebrity activists are getting money. So, in a crowd of 200,000 or 100,000 each week, the number of celebrity activists is 1, 2, and 999 or 998 people are going hungry. As you know, they are malnourished. They also have young babies. They are getting malnourished. So see that it reaches evenly at the most needed places. In this respect, the funds, when you speak to Ms. Jelani, trust not only her, trust all the Gen Zs. Let me tell you that they have turned down offers of more than anything collective we can send through her. What they have been offered are sums which are way beyond anything that we can withhold. And secondly, they've been promised ministries. and they've turned it down. And Tata was offered a ministry, turned down. Faith Odhiambo was offered a ministry, turned down. So these are people of integrity putting their lives on the block, on the chopping block. So don't withhold any trust. Thirdly, help them to get IDs issued. This is within Ruto's control, DO's control. Make a noise about if IDs are not given out, and explain to all the Congress people here. It took 30 years for the southern black vote to get registered and in place. And we are trying to do that in 3 years' time to 2027. So support for that. If you can't get an ID, you can't register to vote. So there must be help to register to vote by first getting the ID. So it's extremely important. The most important thing, be concerned about their safety. Love is a very, very important part of what they are doing. And they need the assurance that people, older people, are not condemning them. The older political class is a disaster. What is happening with these political parties, with Raila, moving from here to there, to there, to there, they cannot bear, they cannot get support from that generation of which I was a part. And there are very, very few people they trust. So they trust the support that you've already given them. And therefore ensure all the time that safety is a major part. No adventurous heroism is to be asked of them. They have done enough, and that is the message you send them. I close by saying, that it is that is a priority. It is in no way exclusive of the concerns of business persons to invest, to buy, to sell, to proceed to have economic arrangements there. Watch out for your remittances. Make sure that they are not taxed, and continue to be a careful investor. This is part of your due diligence, and I'm sorry to have kept you. Thank you very much.